Hello and welcome to this Mindful Potting On Masterclass. Welcome, my name is Kendall Platt and I'm the Mindful Gardening Coach. I help women who struggle to switch off, stop doing all the things they feel they should be doing and instead take a moment to slow down through mindful gardening. As you can tell, it's pretty windy here, but the sun is out, so that is all good. I do this, I work with women in a couple of ways. So I have an individual coaching program called Time to Bloom. And then I also have the group program called Mind in Bloom. And this masterclass is actually one of the 12 or so masterclasses that Mind in Bloom members get access to. As well as the mindset and planning masterclasses that help them to actually make sure they get that time for themselves to switch off and slow down in their gardens, because you know life is busy and it can get in the way. So those tools are there to help them do that. In today's masterclass, I'm going to be covering a few things. I've got my notes here because I don't want to forget anything. Firstly, I'm going to take you through the principles of mindful gardening, including my FLOTS framework. Now, this is a framework that I have come up with. I'm also going to be talking to you about the tools and equipment you're going to need to mindfully pot on your seedlings. And I'm also going to be talking then lastly about how and when to pot on your seedlings, because it's not always that obvious, is it? And the ways I'm going to be teaching you are the ways to do it that A, benefit your plants so they are strong and healthy, but also to benefit you so you are strong and healthy as well. So, you should have been sent your guide ahead of this class. If you haven't got it, it will, well, if you're watching this, then you've either joined live or you've come on the replay. So the guide will be in your replay email, or if you are a member of Mind in Bloom, it will be in the guide section in the private Facebook group. It contains most of the information that I'm going to share with you in a minute, but you may want to, I'm going to talk around the things that I'm doing, so you may want to write a few notes as well. So it's completely up to you. I'm just going to check that. Yeah, all good. Okie dokie. So let's get started. So the FLOTS framework. So this is a framework that can be used whenever you're doing any mindful gardening activity at all to help you find calm more quickly, because I know we're busy women, we don't have tons of time to be spending in our gardens, and sometimes all we get is 5 minutes. So this framework is going to help you to really go from that place of, you know, potentially feeling panicked or overwhelmed or just super busy to finding calm and headspace super quickly. So the first part then, so it's FLOTS, F-L-O-T-S, okay? So the first part is feel. What can you feel? So this is in a physical sense. So, you know, things like the feeling of compost, the feeling of seeds in your hand, depending on what you're doing. Then it's listen. So what can you hear? So at the minute, if I sit quietly, you can hear the bird song, you can hear the wind blowing through the trees. So, you know, that is going to be a really key one for you to sit and... My pots are blown away. I'm going to have to go and get them in a sec. And just kind of really engage that sense and really, you know, quieten your mind and focus on what you can hear. The next one then is observe. What can you see? So this is going to be a really useful one today in mindfully potting on, and I'm going to talk you through the process in a minute, and I will be giving you hints along the way of things to at which different points to engage which different part of FLOTS. The next one then is taste. So what does it taste like? Now, obviously, this isn't going to be doable for all of the mindful gardening activities today, unless you fancy tasting some compost, which I don't. We won't be tasting anything, but as we get further through the season and things start to be harvested, then this is a really effective one. And the last one then is smell. So what can you smell? Smell is such an evocative sense, and it really is closely linked with memory. So that can be a very, very useful one, especially if you are feeling, you know, very overwhelmed and almost, you know, and I use this when I'm feeling really panicky. It can really bring you back to that present moment. So that is a really, really effective one to use. So they are our 5 senses there that we're going to engage throughout this process. Now, before I go on to talk about equipment, because I'm going to need to show you them, I'm just going to rescue my pots. God, it's blown halfway across the garden. So, what equipment are you going to need? So, firstly, you're going to need your seedlings. So I've got a few different ones here. Hang on, I need to pull these back so you can actually see them. There we go. Because I wanted to show you a few different ways of doing things and a few different types of pots that you might have grown in, just so you get a bit of an idea. So you need your seedlings, you need bigger pots. So I've got a selection here. I've got this one for my squash. You are going to need some compost, which I've got in this bag here, always peat free where you can. Much better for the environment, and yeah, really a non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. And if you care about climate change and global warming, then you will make the decision to go peat free as well. A watering can and water, which I've got just off screen over here, which I will grab when I need it. And then something else that I find really useful for putting on is this tiny little trowel, which actually is from Bergen & Ball. It's sold as a gardening tool, but you could just use a teaspoon. I just like this one because it's got nice, it's long, and so you can really get down and underneath the seedlings, which you'll see in a minute when I come to use it. And then a nice to have is a cold frame or a greenhouse. Now, you may already be growing your seeds. You may have grown your seeds in a cold frame or greenhouse, which is great, or you may be growing them on your windowsill. The reason I say cold frame or greenhouse at this point is useful is because obviously, you know, if you've grown in these trays, for example, or in smaller pots, you can fit a certain number of plants on the windowsill. But once they upgrade to bigger pots, you're going to need more space, and that's when it can feel like your windowsills are slightly being taken over by seedlings. So if you can get hold of a cold frame, I know Aldi do some really good value ones, then that will just save you a little bit of space in the house, and you can move, once you've potted on, you can move some of these out into your cold frame. So the next thing then, and this kind of leads on really well, is why do we pot? So I'm going to show you here, because I think this is a really nice demonstration. I hope you can see, I put these in water and I'll explain why in a minute. I hope you can see in the bottom of that plant there that the roots are starting to escape from the pot. Okay, now this is a spaghetti squash, so it will get quite big as a plant. So once the roots are starting to escape from the bottom of your pot, that is a clear sign that they've kind of filled the pot and the plant is looking for some more space to grow. Now, if we didn't pot on, what would happen is that the plant would, the growth of the plant would start to be stunted because it you know, there's not enough nutrients in the soil in there, and there's not enough space for the roots to grow. And what will happen is the roots will grow round and round the inside of the pot, and the plant can become what is called root bound. And that basically means that when this plant then does come to be planted out, instead of the roots going out and spreading into the soil as they should and forming a nice solid base, they will just continue to grow round and around, and you know, and the plant just never really gets that good root system in place, and it will struggle. Okay, so that's one reason why we pot on, just to give the plant some more space. Another thing to point out is that, you know, you might be thinking, oh, well, can't you just plant these straight out into the ground from these smaller things? Depending on the plant, you may be able to do that. But certainly things like squash, they are not tolerant to frost. So if there's a really hard frost, the plants will die. And you've put all this effort into growing these plants to this point. So, you know, you don't want to risk the fact that they might get got by frost. We are mid-April now. You know, I'm in the south of England, and our last frost can be around mid-May. So this is just something to be really mindful of, to not put them out too quickly, especially if they're not frost hardy plants. But they need more space, so that's why we pot them on. There are some plants that you can plant out now because they are a bit hardier, but for example, these plants here, they're so small still that they need a bit of time in a slightly bigger pot to kind of establish themselves, still under cover, establish themselves a bit better before they then get put out into the garden and get exposed to all the elements. So that is why we pot on. And yeah, it's just a process. It can be quite fiddly, but actually it can be a really nice mindful task. So I'm going to share with you now my 7 L's method. I'm going to do it twice for you because there's I want to show you how to do it from this, and I also want to show you another little trick to use when you've got something in a pot like this to pot on as well. But before, well, the first L then is leaves, okay? Because how do you know when to pot on? So we look at the leaves, okay? And this I've got here is a really great example. So this is Aminagus, and you can see here that you've got these kind of round shaped leaves, but you've also got at the base of the plant these flat leaves. Now these flat leaves here are what are called the seed leaves. So when a seed germinates, the first leaves that it will send up are their seed leaves. These tend to be quite big in surface area in order that the plant can get as much energy from the sun as possible and put it into growing. In some plants like this one, the seed leaves, and you can actually see on the end of this leaf here, I don't know if you can see that, but there's actually the seeds still attached, the seed casing, which is quite nice to see. Some plants, the seed leaves are very different to the true leaves, which are what these leaves are called here, okay? But in some plants they're not, they're really similar. So I tend to say it's best to wait until the plant has got at least 2 sets of leaves on it, because, sorry, 3 sets of leaves, because some plants have 2 sets of seed leaves, confusingly. I know it's frustrating, isn't it? So if you wait until they've got 3 sets of leaves on, you're going to be pretty safe. So what will eventually happen to these seed leaves, you can see they're starting to yellow already. They will just eventually die back because they've done their thing now, and the rest of the plant is now grown and you know, ready enough to harvest all of that lovely energy from the sun. So these are kind of redundant now, so eventually they will just rot back, and that's not a problem. That's what they're designed to do. Okay, so that's the first L then, is leaves. So you're going to look at your plant and you're going to decide how many leaves there are on it, and if there's enough true leaves, then they're ready to be potted on. If you still just got those seed leaves, you can pot them on, but they're much more tender at that stage, and there's more chance of them being damaged in the process of potting on. The next L then is liquid. Okay, now before you pot anything on, you want to give it a really good drink, and that is why I've used this kind of like bain-marie type thing here. It's just it's a seed tray that I haven't drilled any holes in, and I've put everything that I'm going to pot in it, and I've given it, there's water in it, and then I've given them all a drink from the top as well. And you want to leave them in there for about half an hour before you pot on. This just means that the root ball tends to stick together a little bit better, because if the soil's dry, when you try and lift them out, it can all just kind of crumble away, especially if the roots haven't you know, completely filled the whole thing. So that's the first L, is liquid. So give them a really good old drink. Something that you can do from a mindful point of view with this is, as you water them and give them a drink, notice the change in the colour of the soil. So you know, as you pour the water, the soil will probably go from kind of like a grey colour if it's dry to a darker colour. So that's a really good opportunity to use your FLOTS there and engage your senses. The next process then is layer. Now I'm going to start with these. I'm going to repot these. So I'm going to take these 2 pots, okay? Move that over to the side. I'm just going to grab some compost, and what you're going to do is you're just going to grab some handfuls of compost, and you're going to fill the pot about halfway, probably. Depends how big your seedling tray is and how big the pots are that you're putting them into, but about halfway. There we go. Okay. So whilst I've been doing that, I'm noticing the sensation of the compost on my hand. It's quite damp, this compost. I might take a little sniff of the compost and really try and engage my sense of smell there and think about perhaps what it reminds me of. As you're placing the compost into the pot, you can actually notice the sensation of the compost falling through your hands. Now this compost I've got here has got a few little kind of like stones and like wood chippy bits in. So, you know, just really kind of focus in on that sensation as it's falling through your fingers. So you've got your 2 pots there. Okay. So the next one then, the next L is lift out. And this is where you're going to lift out your seedlings and you're going to put them into the pots. Now, the way I've sown the seedlings in this tray, let me just move that and show you, is I've sown more than one seed to each cell because I was worried that they might not germinate. And as you can see, these ones are actually getting quite big. So it's, you know, they're definitely overdue a bit more space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my special thing, and I'm just going to slide it down the side of the thing there, and I'm just going to lift it out. Just take that. Okay. So I've got my nice little plug there. I'm done with that for the time being. So I'm going to move that over here. Now you can see there that I've got two distinct plants. So that's why I've got two pots. Now, what we want to try and do when we're potting on, look at all those roots at the bottom there. They're, you know, sort of desperate for a bit more space. We are trying where we can to only touch the leaves. We try not to touch the roots too much because that can damage them. But the only issue is because these have grown together, their roots are kind of intertwined. So I'm having to kind of pull them apart a little bit. But then I'm just going to make a little hole in the top, and I'm just going to pop that in there. So that's the next L then, is oh sorry, when you're doing the lift out, just notice the feeling of the damp compost on your hands as well. That's really you know, if you've given it a good drink, that would be really nice and damp, or maybe not so nice, who knows. The next L then is locate in the center of the pot. So you're going to try and put whatever you grow, you're going to try and put the seedling always in the center of the pot so the roots can spread out into the soil around it. You may, when you come to do this, notice that your seedlings are quite leggy. Now, this is where they have been kept, tends to happen more when you grow on a windowsill. And this is usually because the temperature inside the house is nice and warm, but the light levels are not as good as in a greenhouse, for example, because instead of having all around light, they have light on one side. So very often the heat causes them to grow, but the light means that they're kind of, the lack of light means that they're kind of stretching for the light, which is when they get leggy, so very tall and thin. And quite often as well, they will end up a bit bent, and this is because they've grown towards the light. Now, to remedy the bendiness, when they're growing, you can turn the tray of seedlings every day to make sure they kind of grow straight, and just, you know, every day you just turn by 90 degrees. But if you come to put on and your seedlings are really leggy and they are a bit bent, don't panic. All you're going to want to do is bury the seedling a bit deeper. So you will just dig down, plop the seedling in, and then you will use the compost to fill up to the lowest pair of leaves. You don't want to go any higher than that because that can cause the plant to rot, but you can, because what will happen with a leggy seedling is it will be a really long stem and then the leaves will be kind of sat at the top. So you want to bury it right up to there. And with many plants, certainly things like tomatoes, what will happen is the bit of the stem that is under the soil will actually start to send out more roots. So then you'll get a nice, stronger, more grounded, healthy plant. Okay, so we've located in the center. The next thing then is another layer. So we're going to get some more compost in our hands and we're going to add it around the edge of the seedlings. And we can repeat the same sensation. So we can take a big deep breath. We can feel the compost as we kind of place it in. Now you have to be a little bit careful this time because you don't want to completely cover the seedling, making a nice mess here. It's always the way. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use your fingers and you're going to just gently kind of tamp it in around, okay, and just kind of almost tuck the seedling in. I'm just going to do this other one as well quickly. That is just going to give the seedling a little bit of security. Oh look, you can see sometimes with the compost you'll get a bigger lump as well, so actually that's a really nice opportunity to, you know, mindfully break that up and just really be in that present moment. Okay, there we go. Brilliant. Okay, so that's that one done. Oh, and then the last thing is another L. So we're going to give it a good water. Now to do this, I'm just going to pull that one out because I'm going to use that in a sec. I'm going to put them back in the bain-marie so I don't make a complete mess. And I'm going to get my watering can, which is pretty heavy. Now, when you are watering down the soil, you don't have to use a rose, but I do tend to recommend it because I think it just gives a gentler a gentler flow, and especially if your seedlings are quite small, it means sometimes, you know, if you just blast a load of water on them, they can like get damaged. So just be really gentle with it and just pour into that. And what that will do, as you're doing it, just listen to the sound of the water as you're pouring, and notice the colour change as well. So that soil that I used was actually quite damp, but sometimes if you're using a drier compost, you'll notice a really good colour change. I'm just going to listen, I'm just going to be quiet, stop talking so you can listen to the sound again. So actually that is a really, you know, that is such a relaxing sound, the sound of running water. So yeah, so then the next thing that I'm going to talk to you about is I'm going to pot on this seedling. So I'm going to take you through the process again, but I'm going to show you a really good little tip when you've got a plant like this and you're potting it onto a bigger size. So when you grow in the seed trays, you have no choice but to use the little tool to kind of hoik them out, but you have a few different things that you can use when you are potting this on. So let's look at the leaves first. So the first L. So we've got a few different leaves here. We've got these ones, which are the big seed leaves. Can you see they're big and flat? And then we've got these ones that are starting to emerge, which are the true leaves. So we've got, you know, a good amount of those. So I'm happy to pop this on. As we looked at earlier, you can see that the roots are coming out the bottom. So that's a sure sign that it's getting ready. You know, it needs some more space. So the next thing, give it a big drink. You've seen it's had a big drink already. It's been sat in there. And then the next thing then is to layer some compost into your big pot here. Now, this might take me a bit of time. I've only got small hands, and it's quite a big pot. So there we go, we've put some in there. That whole thing again, if you know, really notice the sensation of it when you're putting it in. There's loads of little stones in here which feel not particularly pleasant against the skin, but that doesn't matter. It's all about focusing on the present sensations, whether those are nice sensations or not so nice sensations. So we're happy with that then. So the next thing then should be to lift out. But I'm going to show you this little trick, which I find really, really helpful for potting on seedlings. And that is to take this one and to sit it, actually I'm going to dig a little hole there because I filled it up a little bit too high, to sit it into your pot like that. Okay, so can you see that? It's in the middle. And then what you're going to do is you're going to get some compost and you are going to place it around the outside of that pot. It feels almost like making a cake, doesn't it, really? But there you go. Okay. Another couple of handfuls. Now I'm purposefully not filling up this pot too much because it's a hatred of mine losing compost as you go around. Okay, so you can see there, I've almost got like, I've created a ring around the outside. So then what happens is, I pull that pot out gently, and then I lift the seedling out. Now, I want to show you this because I think it's important, but hopefully I won't ruin it. Can you see there's the pot-shaped hole in the middle there? So then what you do is you squeeze that out. You can see all those lovely roots. That's actually, with this plant, it came out quite easily. It's another reason to give them a good water as they come out of the pot easier. But sometimes if it's really root bound, you will need to really squeeze this pot to get it out. And then you are just going to place it in the center like that. And it fits perfectly into that little hole that you've just made. And then you're just going to tamp it down. I'm going to just put a little bit more compost on the top there. So engaging those FLOTS again and make sure you're really feeling that sensation. Now, generally, I try not to put compost over the line. You can see there's like a line around the edge of the pot, because when we water it, we don't just want the compost all kind of escaping out. It's just a waste of compost. So that's where I kind of tend to keep them a little bit lower. The plant can still access all the sunshine that it needs. But another bonus is when you do water it, you can almost leave a puddle of water on the top and let the plant kind of slowly drink that in. And then the last thing is to water it. So I'm just going to move these guys that have had a nice drink of water. Oh, and those as well. that guy in, and then just give him a nice drink. The reason we always water plants when we've potted them on is because you can see there how once you poured the water, it then suddenly started to pull the soil down with it. So what that does is it just makes sure there's not too many air holes around the roots of the plant. It just kind of settles the soil around the plant as well. And also, also because, you know, being potted on is stressful for the plant. So we want to make its journey as easy as possible into, you know, so it continues to grow, so it doesn't have that moment of, ooh, what's happened to me? So that's why we make sure we give them a good drink beforehand and we give them a good drink afterwards. So they're kind of, although they might be a bit unhappy about being potted on, you know, they've got plenty of water, they've got plenty of sunlight, so that, you know, we're keeping as many of the elements that they need as possible. So the fact that they've been potted on into a slightly bigger pot doesn't shock them, because that will just mean that they stop growing, and that means you're going to have less flowers or fruit or veg, or depending on what you're growing. So yeah, I want you to carve out some time for you and get gardening mindfully. Take a picture of your setup, so you know, your potting on station, or your happy face after you've had sort of 20 minutes to yourself, getting your hands dirty, and you know, switching off your busy brain, and post it on Instagram. Tag me. My handle is Adventures with Flowers, and yeah, I love to see you guys getting out, getting in your garden, getting mindful, and I'd love to share the photos of you doing that. If you are struggling to find, if you're thinking to yourself, I really want to do this, but actually I'm struggling to find the time to get out in the garden and do some mindful gardening, then you're in luck, because this is exactly what I help women with in my coaching programs. So over the course of the full growing season in Mind in Bloom, we work on streamlining our to-do list. We also work on, you know, in terms of work and also home stuff as well, because I know both can get involved. We work on effective planning, so these activities can fit into your day every day, and you can make sure you get that time for yourself. And we also work on mindset stuff, because, you know, for so many of us, I think it's really easy to feel guilty about slowing down, or, you know, just taking any time for ourselves. So we do a lot of mindset work around that. And then obviously throughout the whole year, you will learn the full suite of mindful gardening techniques as well. So obviously this session is the mindful potting on masterclass, but there are, I think, 12 other masterclasses that you will get as part of that program as well. So if you want some more information, just send me an email and I can send you some more info, and let's have a chat. Thanks so much. Good. Have fun time gardening. Bye.